2, 1.
Welcome to the Board of Education meeting. It's good to see everybody that's here with us tonight. I would like to call the meeting to order. Tonight, we are using closed captioning on the YouTube live stream. And for those speaking during the meeting, please speak clearly so that closed captions are as accurate as possible. So would everyone in the boardroom stand if you're able and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. If you're on Zoom, keep your mics on silent. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Juro fidelidad a la bandera de los Estados Unidos de América y a la república que representa una nación bajo Dios, indivisible, por libertad y justicia para todos. Right. We'll have a brief moment of silence for those that are serving our country and just for our children and families in general. Ms. King, may I have a roll call, please?
Mueller Aragon.
Here.
Danielle Gonzalez.
Here.
Barbara Peterson.
Here.
Crystal Tapia Romero.
Here.
Josefina Dominguez.
Here.
Whitney Jackson.
Here.
Yolanda Montoya Cordova.
Here. Community members may attend the APS Board of Education meetings in person at the Allison Bruce King Educational Complex here at 6400 Uptown Boulevard, or watch the live stream on the APS Board of Education YouTube channel. Our first item is adoption of the June 21st, 2023 Board of Education meeting agenda and approval of the June 7th, 2023 Board of Education meeting minutes and the June 5th, 2023 special Board of Education meeting minutes.
I will move for the adoption of the June 21st, 2023 Board of Education meeting agenda with the removal from consent item 5A1. And then approval of the June 7th, 2023 Board of Education meeting minutes and the June 5th, 2023 special Board of Education meeting minutes.
I have a second.
I'll second. This is Josefina.
Thank you. Can we have a roll call, please?
Peggy Mueller Aragon.
Yes.
Danielle Gonzalez.
Yes.
Barbara Peterson.
Yes.
Crystal Tapia Romero.
Yes.
Josefina Dominguez. Yes. Whitney Jackson.
Yes.
Yolanda Montoya Cordova.
Yes. So generally, our next item is public forum, but I believe we don't have anyone tonight. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So Secretary Jackson, you don't have to have any instructions tonight. So we'll move on with our next item, and it's on to the consent agenda item. So I think before we go on to discussion of A1, let's have consideration for approval of the consent agenda items. 2. I guess it's just A2. And do I have a motion for that?
I'll move for approval of agenda item 5, the consent agenda, A2.
I'll second.
All right, so let's have a roll call on that first.
Peggy Mueller Aragon.
Yes.
Danielle Gonzalez.
Yes.
Barbara Peterson.
Yes.
Crystal Tapia Romero.
Yes.
Josefina Dominguez.
Yes.
Whitney Jackson.
Yes.
Yolanda Montoya Cordova.
So our next item is consideration for approval of the Architectural Selection Advisory Committee's recommendation for award of architectural services for Duranes Early Child Center to SMP Architects. So I think what I'd like to do first is let's go ahead and have a motion on that, and then we'll have discussion. Do I have a motion?
I move that we accept item A1, consideration for approval of the Architectural Selection Advisory Committee's recommendation for award of architectural services for Duranes Early Childhood Center to SMPC Architects.
Do I have a second?
I'll second. Josefina Dominguez.
Okay, so let's have discussion. Board Member Mueller Aragon, I guess we'll start with you. You had some discussion items on questions on this.
Right. I mean, I just had a lot of questions back since, probably about over a month ago. Some of them were answered, but all of them weren't answered. So I would just appreciate answers to these questions. So I'm not sure if Dr. Blakey, you'll be the one that answers them all, or
It depends on the question.
Depends on the questions. It'll be the questions that you all had already received. So I did go through, because we did receive all the preschools and what their waiting lists look like. And I finally got to look at them. That took a little bit of time just because we couldn't get access to them. And so I looked at all of them. And what I found is I think there were 5 that we didn't have numbers for as of, I don't know, probably an hour ago or something. So I didn't have those 5 numbers, but I looked at all the other numbers and found that of the schools, I think there's like 55 just traditional schools, and then there was some charter schools. But of those, of those 55 just traditional schools, there were only 15 sites that had all their classes full from the numbers that you sent. And I counted up, and I could have counted wrong because I was doing this, last minute, but I counted 706 total accepted children. So I'm assuming that those numbers are the most up to date and those are the correct numbers.
I will ask Ms. Gormley if you can answer the programmatic questions about the early childhood enrollment. I believe with the early childhood that a lot of students enter when school starts, but I'm not sure. I can't see who's on Zoom, so I couldn't tell if Cheryl was on.
It doesn't sound like it is. Oh, there it is. It is.
Can you repeat the question?
So so board member, I mean, I know that we had during the right sizing committee, we had an opportunity to go through like all the vacancies and some of the concerns, and they had given us where the vacancies existed. You felt like, because they do say here, the New Mexico pre-K classrooms, there's 56 sites, 76 programs. And then they listed where we had vacancies. And are you stating that with the information that you received, it appears that there's more vacancies, or?
I didn't have, since I just got the numbers, I wasn't able to compare them to that since they were just coming in slowly. So I wasn't able to compare those. So I am just, I'm curious, and this is probably the question, is if there are 706 so far that are registered or accepted to the preschools, but yet one of the numbers that we were given is that we had 15, I think it was 1,500.
So board members, I have not seen the latest data that you're looking at. So what that could be is last year, at the end of last year, prior to enrollment for next year, we had the vacancies that were reported at the right sizing meeting. And those vacancies were based on if a classroom is too large, but we still have students, then we open up another classroom, but it may only fill to 5 where it could hold 16. So then there's 11 vacancies available in that position or in that program. So I don't know what next year's enrollments are.
I think this was it appeared that this was the enrollment as of May of 2023. That's what it looked like to me.
That's June 9th of 2023.
Yeah.
Yes, so board president, board member, the issue that Ms. Gormley is bringing up is that at the right size meeting, what you saw was a culmination of last year's. What you're seeing now, I believe that the early childhood department is where they are so far
Right.
with registrations, but a lot of the pre-K and kindergarten students come in as we get close to school starting for registration. So I'm sure when they update those numbers, like in
August
mid-August,
or
you'll see a,
End of
yes,
July or whatever,
Mhm,
whenever kids
correct.
are kind of going back to school. So those would be good numbers for us to be able to see. There, of the ones that did have, waiting lists, there weren't too many. And the concern that I had with some of them is some of them had like 0. Like they had nobody there were several schools where there was like two, there were a couple, like 1, 2, 3, 4, I think, that had like none. So, I mean, and some of them.
Clarify that for me. I don't understand. what you
So
mean
let
by
me
none.
say, Via Vista had only 3, one of on the 1, 2, 3, and their other 2 classes that they have teachers for had nobody accepted in their classes. So they only had 3 in one class, and the other 2 classes that I'm assuming they must have had this past year that they're hoping to fill.
I think Board Member Mueller, Eric, it could also be, I'm not looking at the data in front of me, but if it's a DPC program, it could be that we build those based on previous enrollment so that when students are identified and in need, we have the programs available for them. I don't believe that we added any additional programs, but the students qualifying or showing need for those programs, that's a constant.
That's like coming from like Child Find, et
Right.
cetera.
Right.
Yeah, the developmental preschool
Right.
classroom is very different because they did describe to us in the right sizing committee the need to keep.
And those are much
Those- yes.
smaller classes, because you can see there's like 3 or 2, and I understand that. They had one when I was teaching at Petroglyph, so it's a much smaller class. So I do understand that. So it would just be good to just keep us updated on what those numbers are. And then I know I had the they did update the waiting lists, and then we already had the vacancies, so that was fine. So then the question, this probably isn't going to go to you, this is probably going to go to Dr. Blakey Duran, is this new Duranus Early Childhood Center proposed is going to be built to house 300 students, as we were told at the right sizing committee, correct?
At this time, what we are asking for is the approval of the design for it.
Right.
To create a center that would hold up to
Up to.
300.
Okay, and so then I know the question that, I don't think that was my question, was in order to to get to 100% capacity, that would be 300 students. And that would take, from what I saw, is going to take like several years to get there. Correct?
It could, just for clarification, the closing of La Luz
Made those kids
made
go to
a
Duranus.
domino effect for the need at Duranus. And so because of that, the consolidation of the programs in the North Valley particularly is all housed at Duranus. So even as soon as next year, that program will be over 100 students in the first year, just with the current consolidated programs there. So that's the domino effect from La Luz has an impact on Duranus. And at the beginning of the right size, I think probably the first meeting, Duranus was identified, I think, as the first, I'm just looking at Mr. Wajinji, as the top priority of a school needing to be right sized. So there's kind of 2 things going on where we have to do something with Duranus due to just the matrix of how we looked at schools that needed to be right sized. And then as we closed La Luz, we have a consolidation now of programs at Duranus.
Okay, I did see that. So we're anticipating the inaugural year, which we are not exactly sure when that's going to happen for sure, because we have to get all the other infrastructure at the other schools taken care of as well. So we just anticipate that there will be right now 100 students, and then we expect that in time to grow to 300.
Yes.
Okay. Then what, and I know this is just maybe hard to answer, but you really anticipate, you're really pretty positive that we're going to have 100 students that first year.
I wouldn't say 100% positive, but I'm pretty confident that based on Duranus, as of last year, had 48 preschool students without the consolidation of programs. So just based on the consolidation of programs and the growth we're seeing, especially in the DPC program, we'll be probably close to 100 just with the consolidated programs that are going in for next year.
And then I did see that you all did get me the information about some of the construction that had been done lately. So they had added a classroom block in the late 2000s, and then they had also done a boiler conversion and evaporative cooler, et cetera. So when they are, and I know this committee is going to figure out how that's going to look, how much of that that's newer are they going to even be able to use of that classroom block?
So they'll be able, I might pull Mr. Wujinje or Miss Allred out, but just in my knowledge of the school and visiting, the newest addition is a preschool block and early child and a kindergarten wing. So that new addition of a wing would be utilized in this. The part of the school that needs to be rebuilt regardless, because it is identified as one of the top facilities for right sizing, that would need to be rebuilt. But the newest construction at that school is early childhood classrooms now.
Okay, that's what I thought. So that's good that they would be able to use that, because I'd be ashamed to knock something down that's not that old. So do you have any idea, Dr. Blakey, about how many square feet, or that's not going to even come into play yet? If you want to house 300 students, I know there are specifications for early childhood centers that you have to meet. So do you have an idea about how many square feet this is going to be, if you exclude the 10,000 square feet that's already there?
Miss Allred, do you know the square footage of the early childhood design?
I do not have that off the top of my head, but I will tell you that one of the first things we're going to do is look at all the buildings and see if any of them, with the exception of the newest building, are salvageable and can be reused. So, but I can get you the square footage of a 300.
Because I'm sure that is just, there are those standards that you have to meet. So, okay, if you could, that'd be good. They are new. And so the total cost for this architectural design is supposed to be that $3 million. That's going to come from ESSER funds. Is that seemed high to me, but maybe it's not.
It is
nowadays.
High. That's not the correct number.
Okay.
Architectural fees are about $900,000.
Okay. And so because we don't know what I know every square foot costs right now are really high. So, we could be at over $400 a square foot possibly, and then just meeting all those standards that we have to meet. So we don't really have any idea what the whole construction cost would be, Ms. Allred?
Yes, we do. If I can put my finger on it.
Okay.
Zito, do you know off the top of your head? Always good with numbers. Yeah, we're like at 16.
About 16 million. Okay. Okay. And I know that the 3 million is going to come, or the 900,000 will come from ESSER funds. And so that 16 million, is that going to come from ESSER funds as well? It won't, right? Because we have to have expended them by next September.
Right.
So that will just have to come from somewhere. That will have to come from somewhere else then. Okay. The thing that I was just told from families that when they saw that we were going to be using ESSER funds for this prototype design was that they thought that wasn't a plate. And I haven't been able to answer them because I haven't got a question. They thought that it should be used for students that we have right now to help them recover academically from, all the trauma and everything that, all the lost learning that they had to go through during COVID. And so if you could tell me how I can give an answer to them, because those are students that are going to be new students that weren't affected by COVID, and they felt that the ESSER funds should be spent on that. So how can I answer them?
So in the ESSER funds, we have about $220 million
Mhm.
of ESSER funds. So the money that would be invested in the community for these buildings, primarily looking at just what we need to do with the facility of Duranus, would be an investment in making sure that what we've seen in students from the effects of the pandemic, having the need for early childhood, seeing what's needed for our investment in elementary, I think shows the benefit, the cost benefit of investing these dollars on future generation of students who have been impacted in the community when we've seen the loss of students throughout the district as well. So pulling students in and bringing them into the district early also helps with us being able to increase our enrollment.
Okay.
And it's it's a very small percent. So if we, and I believe at the next finance meeting, we'll be going over the ESSER dollars that the $220 million budget. And you will see in that presentation, the amount of money that has been used to directly impact the students in the classroom and learning loss, and a lot of Ms. Gormley's team and her work on what they're doing with those funds. So we'll be able to go over that at the next meeting.
Okay, because I think that's just an important one to answer. And then I know that we got the cost of leaving Duranus open. So this last year, it cost $3.3 million to operate Duranus. And so I didn't have a chance to look at the whole thing. So what is it going to cost yearly to operate the Early Childhood Center?
I think Ms. Apodaca is on to answer the specifics of that, and the money from this. So the money for the early childhood program is a little bit different because it's coming from the state, not through operational dollars. So the budget of it is a little bit different. But
Because I think you get 10,000 per student. So if you have 100, then we figure out how much that is. You get to 300,
I
and
think,
we triple that.
Ms. Apodaca, are you on, or Ms. Montoya? She tricked us.
I'm here. I don't know where my
You
my video keeps turning off. There it is.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I don't know which version of the cost benefit you have in front of you, but yeah, if we leave it as is, we see that we continue to lose more money. It goes more and more negative each year, because we're assuming, even if we just lost 5 students, which has been the trend, we get less and less revenue per se, and the cost actually increases because we put a 3% on FTE escalation on that. And so you just see the huge loss. And then on the top, the cost shows the expend cost for the pre-K would only, starting with a little bit of if we only had the 100 students or the 124, we were ranging that's what we were expecting for the first year, you would go slightly negative, and then after that you either break even or gain money. And so even if we stayed at only the 124 or 100 students and we still lost a little bit money, it still is a huge cost benefit as to just leaving Duranus as is. I hope that answered your question.
Okay. I thought that's about what it would be. So we just, even if we think, because I don't anticipate we're going to have a whole bunch more people having more children, that they're not going to be there. But you're saying even if we just stay at the 124, that we're pretty close to break even very early. So we'll, we won't be operating in the red for very long.
Correct.
Okay. Let me just make sure that those are all the questions because a lot of them got answered, and I tried to check them off as they did. So then the only other thing that I thought was important, I know you came up with this early design, the design group that's going to be helping. And so I know that we had asked to make sure that we had other private providers because the majority of them were government staff. And so I thought that was very, very important to have those conversations with those community-based leaders out there. I was just looking around my neighborhood and how many early childhood centers there are, how many preschools there are, and just not within a few miles of where I live, I counted like a dozen just between the, churches, between early childhood centers, between home-based centers, and just affecting them when our birth rate just doesn't seem to go up, just doesn't, seem to be the wisest thing to do. And then some of the other questions, if you all can just, because it's not going to play into this decision today, is if I can get some of the other answers that have more to do with right sizing than have to do with Duranis. And what I can do is just resend those to Johanna to send to you. So I'm not wasting more time talking about something that we're not talking about tonight.
Well, then also we just need to use our right sizing committee too, to bring those questions up during the committee conversations. So hopefully you'll have those prepared. And when we come to the right sizing committee, we're having the discussion and we can do that. All right. So is there any other discussion?
I do.
Go ahead.
I have some questions because I attended the right sizing committee and obviously not able to ask questions because I'm not on that committee. My biggest concern again is seeing the amount of vacancies that show, on our list. And this carries through from last year and then obviously this year as well. And let me back up a little bit. How many slots from La Luz are anticipated to move over to Duranis?
Next year at Duranis, they'll have 7 classrooms. And then the additional Zuni immersion language classroom. I believe they had 3 classrooms this year. So
there was 3 currently in La Luz now.
no, there were 3 currently at Duranis. And then they moved
I showed 2 currently at
MacArthur.
Duranis.
I had 2 also.
So then they had 2 and now they're going to go to 7 because they're moving the La Luz, MacArthur and Cochiti. Are they moving the Cochiti program too? And the Zuni immersion program.
Okay. So, and those are strictly pre-K slots that you're referring to?
Yes.
And I think 2 of those classrooms are the DPC classrooms as well.
Okay, so out of the 7, 2 are DPC and 5 are pre-K? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I don't have
I don't
it
have
in
it
front of
with
me.
And I don't think Allison's on.
But Ms. Gabaldon,
I don't have my notes.
Um,
Joyce
we
is
can
history.
send these to you.
Okay, because again, I'm just trying to justify the need. Again, because it goes back to not filling our current slots. And currently now looking forward that we still have yet to fill new slots when I know there's programs throughout the city that have already been able to sustain and, withhold going forward. And Board Member Miro-Aragon made a valid point. Like when I see community-based providers, like this is their livelihood and what they're doing, and we're anticipating putting this new program out there when we haven't even filled what we currently have, and ultimately hurt other businesses, hurt other providers that are already doing the same type of service. It just doesn't align right in my brain, and like for me, you guys know this, like early childhood is my thing. It's no secret. This is what I've done for over 20 years. And I am a huge advocate that parents should have a choice to be able to pick whatever type of environment that they feel their student should best learn at, whether it's public, private, faith-based, whatever. That's a family's choice. But again, I can't justify seeing that we have declining birth rates. Our own APS enrollment has declined. We're not filling our current spots, yet we think now that we have this hub, it's going to suddenly be filled and we're going to have this trajectory of filling 300 students. I don't see how that happens. And again, when we have multiple other providers within the same area that are providing identical services because it's the same standards we're following. There's not anything different on how we're going to pull these children. Because ultimately, when we look at the grid, the first year it is in the red. I know we say it's not a lot. It's 184,000 plus, and we're hoping we'll go up. I don't know where these students are going to come from. Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, I think the key difference is the constitutional amendment. Whereas last year, pre-K education for 3 and 4-year-olds wasn't a constitutional right in New Mexico. Coming school year, it is. So I think that's where the kids are coming from. And what I understood from the Right Sizing Committee was decisions on long-term growth in early childhood and additional hubs and how that growth is going to happen and what's the saturation of public school pre-K versus community-based pre-K will depend on recommendations from this new committee. So I think a lot of those things are still TBD.
Mhm. And I agree with Board Member Gonzalez, because what I've also heard is that this whole conversation, that because of that amendment, that there's going to be this newer expectation, especially for like even public schools, around creating opportunity to make that available. And I think what we're only trying to do here is also to create an opportunity for us to figure out how we can do that. Will it work? You know, will this hubbing be the answer? I'm also looking at pre-K classrooms, and if you just look at just the vacancies in this particular zone, there's only 1 vacancy, which also tells me something there too, because and then the consolidation also just has me concerned, because we already approved those boundary changes and we already approved that shifting. So those families already have been disrupted somewhat, and we're planning to consolidate that already. And I think it was an opportunity for us also to be responsive to what the new Educational Act is asking for around early childhood, and at least being, a little bit forward, if you are thinking forward, so that we can design something that we have an opportunity with the community providers, with the parents in the community. And as I understand, Board Member Gonzalez, your community was pretty responsive to this, correct? Yeah, they've come out and have been really responsive around this is something that they see as useful in their community. When we first came to the Right Sizing Committee, I know there was like a grand plan, it was grand gesture, and I kind of like went back, whoa, wait a minute, because I wasn't sure. And I like the idea of us starting here first, figuring out everything that we need to do, and then moving forward with hubbing as potential, because there's also this concern that some parents definitely like it when it's at a school as well, because it helps with drop off and it helps with all of those pieces. But in this particular instance, we've run out of room at the schools that we're consolidating. And so there isn't that capacity, but it's still within the same neighborhoods, and it helps those families that are going to be hubbed in this area. We also heard from some families that desire to also want to have their pre-K students in a like group as well. I mean, it was kind of half and half, but this is an opportunity also for us to have those pre-K classrooms together, and that professional development and that networking within that particular group. And I also heard just the potential around the DPC side of it, because we also know that we don't have enough capacity there, but this would also create us an opportunity with our DPC and to really get it right.
So Board Member Tapia Romero, I understand what you're saying, and we believe that families should have a choice too, especially when it comes to pre-K programs. I have 6 grandchildren, 4 have either gone or been in some pre-K program, from anywhere from faith-based, private, and now in one of our own pre-K programs. So I support family choice. I also know, because I have a daughter that runs an autism center, they have been looking for a building for over a year. And I also heard that at a Right Sizing Committee, ECECD funds the program, but there's no money for facilities. We are fortunate that we have the infrastructure that can provide the facilities along with the program. And so we are serving a community need by using our facilities that meet the requirements of an early childhood center to provide community programs.
Right. And I'm familiar with the whole process because again, this is like what I do. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there because ECECD does provide capital money for community-based programs to be able to do remodeling, do expand buildings. I only know because I was awarded that, so I know it's there. So I think there's a lot of misconception there. When board member Montoya Cordova said that there's only one spot, I'm looking at what's listed here for Duranis and it shows that there's 9 spots left in each classroom. So I don't know, what data you're reviewing. This is just based on what we were sent now.
Okay.
And it goes back to, and I feel like we're trying to saturate a market that doesn't show the need again for services. We have not collaborated with providers. The providers that we show that were listed on there were not essentially true community-based providers. Like we have people from the city, from the state, from other organizations, but it's not people who are truly have done this and it affects their community, their families, their businesses. And it's unfortunate because that's a pre-K standard that we're required to collaborate with programs in our area. And APS has failed badly at that. I know firsthand because I have called to been like, we have some openings. Can you share your wait list? And they will not share information. Or we say vice versa, we have extra and no one will actually work with us on how we can, work as a team to best serve these families. So I see how we haven't even completely met the need, met the standard, been able to operate the program. And I guess the way it should be, and to be able to look ahead and be like, okay, now we're going to create this great hub, which I think it has a lot of potential, but there's still a lot of unanswered questions for me or to be able to support why we need this. So, and again, we've had providers talk many times that come in and spoke at public comment and say, no one's talking to us, no one's collaborated. And to this day, no one has ever done anything with them. And I'm like, why aren't we reaching out to these people who said that they wanted to support and be part of the conversation? So.
Any other discussion? Go ahead, Board Member Peterson.
I think I can agree with Board Member Tapia Romero and Board Member Mueller-Aragon about the importance of making sure that our programs are developmentally appropriate, making sure that we really recognize what young children need, make sure that we don't make them look like first grade and second grade for 4-year-olds. And I think we've got a lot of unity on that point. But I did hear the exact same arguments against APS and the state expanding kindergarten, that it wasn't something that many families were aware of and committed to until the service was right there and accessible in an easy way. And I think for many of the LESC meetings and LFC meetings that I've sat in on, what I know is that over and over again, when we talk about how our students do in school, one of the huge hurdles is that we do not have adequate preschool for our 3 and 4-year-olds. And it's something that we really have to take seriously. I think there will always be people who have private providers that they are absolutely committed to, that they adore, that they would never leave under any circumstance. But we know that there's a huge number of families that feel many barriers for one reason or another. And we have the ability and the responsibility of addressing that. We have lots of things to figure out, like what are we going to do for extended care? How do we partner with other providers to make sure that for those families where they have to leave a child at 7 a.m. and can't be home lots of times until 7 p.m. and consequently rely on some combination of extended family and neighbors and other people. How can we meet those needs? Because it's a serious, serious need. But those are things that it's our responsibility to take on and solve. But I feel like this commitment to this physical entity is the first step that we can take.
Okay, any other discussion? I mean, we have a motion and we have a second. We could just call the vote and we'll see where we are. Do you want?
Clarification, how long have we had an early childhood executive director?
The new
It's like a month.
Miss Gabaldon.
Yeah, it's been new.
It was previously a director or an instructional manager, and it is now an executive. I think it's a senior director. It's not an executive director. It's a senior director, and she was hired, I believe, in March. So she's fairly new to the role, but she's hit the ground running and I think is doing a great job. And I believe she has reached out to many community members, including a woman that was here at the board meeting. I believe that she has, I know at least one, and that's not a lot and it's not nearly enough, but it's a start. I don't think she's hesitant at all to have communication and partnership with our community providers and our private providers. And
Okay.
Just giving it time then.
Well, we had someone in that spot before, which was Mary Ann. So it's not necessarily a new position. We
But
just the
one
new
more
person. No, another person. Mary Ann's no longer there.
So we're still the same number of people, but a new direction.
Board Member Jackson.
Yeah, I just want to like bring it back home. So in 3 sentences, what exactly are you asking us to vote on right now? Is it 900? Here, I'll offer up 3 sentences. Is it $900,000 to approve an architectural firm to start a prototype build out for the school? Just the design? Is that what you're asking us to? So it's just the design. We're not starting construction. You're just asking us to approve a design that potentially is going to be at Duranis, that we now have kids coming from La Luz and Cochiti that are going to be there. This is a hub. This is a prototype. I gave more than 3 sentences, but I just want to make sure,
Yes.
because I feel like we kind of got off on a tangent, which understandably, I mean, I totally understand why we're on this tangent because I get it. I'm not sure that the need's there either, but I just want to make sure, what are you asking us to vote on?
So today, Madam Chair, members of the board, we're asking you to vote on the approval of the architectural selection for an architectural firm that will be tasked with designing a project at Duranis.
Okay. And how long do we anticipate that design work is going to take?
Well, they typically take about a year, but we are up against the ESSER fund deadline, which is September of 2024. So we will definitely have to be done by then.
So this design work, so August 3rd of 2023, 2 months, our kids come into Duranis starting in 2 months?
Yes, in the current infrastructure at the school.
Okay, so this early childhood center isn't going to happen until 2024? Or they're coming in the current structure?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And so you're asking us to approve $900,000 for something that's potentially going to take a year. In that year, there's a possibility things could change, right?
Sure, yes.
Okay.
not totally
Where
sure
does it
where I
say
was going.
900,000? Like,
That's what I can't find the 900,000 in our packets.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, members of the board, we're not asking you to approve the dollar amount. We're only asking you to approve the selection of the architectural firm. The 900,000 came in response to Board Member Mueller Aragon when she asked how much the architectural fees were going to be for this particular design.
And so you're estimating under $1 million.
That's okay. That's where there was like some
Mhm.
confusion is where was this amount? So it's really just the architectural firm.
Yes.
It's the selection. Thank you.
All right. So we have a motion and we have a second. I'm going to call for the vote.
Peggy Mueller Aragon,
No, I just don't believe it's needed, and I'm also concerned for the developmental appropriateness of pre-K.
Danielle Gonzalez,
Yes.
Barbara Peterson,
Yes.
Crystal Tapia Romero,
No.
Josefina Dominguez,
Yes.
Bonnie Jackson,
No.
Yolanda Montoya Cordova.
Yes. All right. So motion carries. Our next item is just some discussion here. This is for me. Let me pull myself together here. So what I wanted to just do is to give, or no, we're on the negotiated agreement, right?
No, that already.
Oh, that already passed. That was on the consent. Never mind. Trying to look at my,
We're on student outcomes. focused governance.
yes. Yeah, we're moving right along here. All right. So on our student outcomes is just to give an update, especially for those folks that might be listening. So what comes next? So we've begun to shift our new form of governance nearly a year ago. I can't believe it's already been that long. And we've come a long way, but we still have some work to do. We now have 4 goals that reflect the vision of our community, which were made clear during the listening sessions, that they want Albuquerque Public Schools to focus on early literacy, math proficiency, post-secondary readiness, and making sure that our students have the skills, habits, and mindsets for life success. So there they are, the APS goals and guardrails. We've all become pretty accustomed to it. I will say it was heartwarming to be at a meeting yesterday, and you can hear the staff already talking about student outcomes don't change until adult behaviors change, and recognizing the importance of our goals and guardrails. We've also committed to honoring the community's values, the guardrails, as we direct the superintendent's work towards achieving those goals. And we expect our schools to provide wraparound support systems, equitable allocation of resources, and high-quality curriculum and instruction while engaging families in the community and providing support and voice to the staff. And so while the board is focused on the goals and guardrails, the administration developed a strategic plan prioritizing its work towards accomplishing the goals. They're also designed interim goals and guardrails that will help measure progress. And I believe at our last meeting, we said they presented them to us, but if you have questions, go ahead and type those up and send those in so that we can get some information on those or get some responses back to you. So we are now about halfway through our implementation timeline. That's kind of crazy and it's kind of scary at the same time. We have set the expectation that the budget team will align resources to goals and guardrails, and I think we've done a really good job of doing that. That was indicative of just the budget that we passed and feeling confident about where we were. And some board members are working on board operating procedures and others are working on a policy review. And as Policy Chair Gonzalez noted at the last policy committee meeting, we should see the results of both efforts in early August. The finance department is also working on a student outcomes focused budget policy that we hope to review in August. In addition, I am preparing to appoint a community engagement planning committee to plan stakeholder engagement. So part of what student outcomes focused governance is it's not just a one and done. We're going to go back out to the community so that we can share where we are. I know there's a lot of excitement around the strategic plan because there's also going to be sort of the unveiling and saying here's where we are. But we're going to have to gear up for a lot of community engagement, I think, this fall, because we're also going to be engaging in a superintendent search, which I'll talk about next. Let's see. Beginning this fall, we'll start monitoring the progress toward meeting the goals and guardrails, which is really where the hard work is really around the monitoring piece. And so before we do that, we have to learn how. So tomorrow, June 22nd, the members of the Board of Education and key administrators will be attending training with our coaches from the Council of Great City Schools. And I hope everyone has done their homework. So there was 3 reading assignments. And I just want to acknowledge Board Member Dominguez and Board Member Jackson also for participating in the cohort that we're part of, because I think we've learned a little bit about progress monitoring and have had a chance to engage with other school boards and just sort of watching and hearing from them what's working and what's not working. So I thought that's been, I don't know, for me personally, I think it's been really helpful to listen to what's going on and just to be engaged with other board members from across the country that have been doing this work or starting this work, but just hearing where we are and some of the struggles and the challenges. But the progress monitoring part, I think, is really going to be it's going to be exciting, but it's also where the rubber hits the road exactly. So the administration is preparing a 5-year monitoring calendar so the board will know what goals and guardrails to measure at each meeting, and we will begin the process when we get results from the ELA and math assessment probably in September. So that's what we're still waiting on, remember, for that final assessment so that we can kind of figure out where we're starting and where we're going to head. So I just want to thank all the board members and the staff who have worked so hard on this effort. And I'll just open it up here if there's anything else that the board members would like to add around student outcomes focused governance, or anyone have anything to add. Go ahead. Board Member Dominguez, were you going to say
I
something?
think the most exciting piece of this is that we are representing the visions and vision and goals of our community. And I think once we went out into the community, listened to parents, community leaders, they came to the same visions. And so for me, it's hopeful, right? So yeah, I'm excited, and I'm looking forward to more community engagements.
I think that's going to be the best part, is when we get a chance to go back out. Any other comments? No, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question just about the interplay between our progress monitoring, the establishment of a district level accountability system, assessment and accountability system, and the PED's, New Mexico Vistas, and their recent release of schools designated for improvement. So that list came out. There are many, many APS schools on it in TSI, CSI, ATSI, and MRI status. And I haven't heard anything from the district around which are those schools, what the plan is, how they're going to take advantage of some of the supports from PED, but really, like, where's the coherence for all of these pieces? And as I asked that, I realized that's probably a superintendent elder question. So I ask it for the record, because I think it's really important for us to figure out how to put all these pieces together.
I agree with you, because what I've been watching when I watch like other boards and asking just people that I'm working with too, just on other states, it's like through the progress monitoring, it's like somehow all of that does get to come into play, because we as board members will have that kind of tucked into the back of our heads. And as we're getting ready with questions that we're asking, I think those are the ways that we get there, because it's that strategic question too, is like, how is this impacting the TSI schools, or the schools that we have listed here for improvement? How does the data show up? How is it represented in terms of the kinds of progress that's being made there? So I think it really helps direct us as board members too, around the things that we want to know about what our students know and are able to do and what schools are doing. And then it really becomes that engagement in that conversation. I'm not sure that we're going to tackle everything all at once. And what I've also seen from the process is that it's really wonky when it first starts out. The whole progress monitoring doesn't go over. It's not just like easy initially, and I can see why it's not. Because I think we're going to have to also get used to asking good questions and thinking really strategically about what we want to know, rather than just focusing on just the why did you do it that way kind of thing, or what's, what did you, who was there, what was there, but really sort of looking at the strategy behind it and asking around that question of why did we pick that? Why did we pick this particular strategy, and what are we seeing it as the specific outcomes for the students that we want to serve? But I think it's going to be a work in progress, and I think we're going to all get better at it. And I don't think it's going to be, all at once, but your question's on the record, and I think that's a good question to have out there. And so tomorrow,
The progress and the practice. And I also have a tremendous sense of urgency because of the I don't know, the tragedy of these scores. It's really bad. And considering that we're only a few months from school opening and thinking about how we allocate resources, being people, time, and money, it would be very helpful to see a plan for how the district's going to respond to those designations. So.
yep. And maybe tomorrow when we have our workshop, you could ask that question too, in terms of what kind of guidance they've given to other school districts in terms of how you could pull that intersection together around all those things and how they might interplay.
And I can certainly bring the question back to the superintendent.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Go ahead, Barbara.
And I think I absolutely agree with the urgency, but not with a sense of panic. I mean, I listened in on the NAEP report today, and it was interesting because basically everyone, I mean, it may be that we are on a certain place in the bell curve, but the whole bell curve has shifted in terms of how schools are doing. And so our urgency is sort of a historical urgency, not a sense of panic right at this moment. It's how do we really deal with a lot of the realities that our community faces. And I mean, the other thing that I've done just recently is I wanted to look and see sort of where from the Kids Count reports, where we stand. And basically when you look at that and acknowledging we've just been through a pandemic, even before that, for a whole variety of reasons, NAEP scores were going down starting from about 2015, not here specifically, but nationwide. We mirror what's happening nationwide. So anyway, I was looking at the Kids Count, and basically the states where families are doing well, where kids are being taken care of, education outcomes look pretty good. And in the states where families are struggling, where there's food deserts, where there's poverty, where there's lack of housing, where there's no access to health care. And I don't say that as an excuse. I'm just saying that if we don't take that into account as we look at root causes and how we set up what we do as a school in partnership to everyone else, we're going to miss the mark because there aren't silver bullets. Kids are whole entities. And so I will never, ever say that we don't need to get better at what we do. That is never what I'm going to say. But I also think we have a reality, and it was interesting looking at some of the materials for tomorrow, talking about root causes. Got to start with the root causes for a lot of the analysis as we figure out how to address moving forward. Doesn't mean that we don't take the goals seriously, but as we address how we move towards them, it's not simple. One other little breath of fresh air that was because I was sort of cringing at the idea of tuning into the NAEP report. They ended with a panel that included teachers and students. And it was powerful and it was real. And I just think we need to look at where we are in a national context with basically the entire country looking at the same issues of how do we support students and move forward. So it's urgent, but not filled with panic.
That was the best part of the kids and the teachers.
Mm-hmm.
It really was.
Yep. Without a doubt, because the data is the data. It's there. There's.
I'm hopeful. I still am hopeful that I think with a focused, just being focused on the outcomes and having the conversations, I think it'll help us to learn, I think, where we have some strengths and where our challenges are. I'm hopeful. I feel a sense of urgency as well, because I do want our kids to do better. I don't know anybody that doesn't. But I'm also hopeful that we're setting the conditions and we're creating the conditions that will help everybody that's in that setting in a school, the teachers, the staff, everybody, and our parents and our community, that we're creating those conditions to have, just a more thoughtful approach, conversation, and thinking about where it is. And I'm hoping that what we're going to learn through our progress monitoring are where we have some really strong practices and what's working. Maybe we need to scale those up, things that are really could shine a light on places where we are doing well, but also shine a light on the things that are not, and have the courage to say that's not working.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're going to have some really courageous conversations as a result of this. And I'm grateful for that. I think that's a step in the right direction for transformation, is to just be thoughtful and to be honest with ourselves, and to have the ability to take a look at our data and have this conversation in a way that helps us to, I know I said this yesterday, is to fail forward. I don't want to use it as a way to just it's not about beating people up or where we are, but really to have us really be in this continuous loop to say, I hadn't thought of doing it that way, or now I'm thinking about doing this way. So I'm just really hopeful about where we can head with the conversations and actually see changes, see glimmers of hope, and hopefully see big changes too as a result of that, and everybody coming into agreement with some of the strategies that we need to adopt, district-wide, or also learning the things that we don't need to adopt district-wide, but we need to keep in certain parts of our community because it's the right activity for a particular community and their needs, and it's right-sized, or if it's appropriate in the way that we're doing it for some communities. So I think there's going to be some aha moments, and there's going to be some painful moments through this process, but I think it'll be helpful to have those. All right, anything else? No?
Just on that topic of tone, when I look at scores, yes, I get a sense of urgency. And yet when I talk to parents, students, and teachers at schools, I'm reminded that I have to be careful about how I communicate that urgency. I have to tone it down because it's a very layered conversation. Children are listening, adults who are invested in those children and in those communities are listening, and we need to be very layered and respectful of their reality. Nobody does this job for the money, and parents invest what little time and money they can. Some parents have more to invest. I think we just need to be aware that, and I say this for myself, my children were part of that 20%. They were not part of the 80%. That was my reality. And so, again, just our tone as we address urgency, it has to be respectful and curious more than anything else. We just have to be curious and suspend judgment, suspend what I think I know or what I know, but maybe there's another perspective that I'm missing. And that's why I think the family engagement, the community engagement piece is so important.
Thank you. Any others? No, we'll move on to our next item, which is special issues. And this is an update on the right sizing discussion group. Board Vice President, you have the floor.
Okay. So we had our, and I'm going to, of course, my voice is going to start going right now. The right sizing discussion group, we met on Monday, June 12th. And what we were looking at was a fiscal impact of moving students from La Luz to nearby schools and then renting the facility to the Albuquerque Sign Language Academy. We also analyzed the impact of turning Corrales and Janet Kahn into K-8 schools and figuring out that financial impact of converting them from elementaries to K-8 schools, which is a little bit trickier than we thought it would be. So if adding 6th and 7th and 8th grade to elementary schools keeps middle school students from leaving the district, it's possible that the cost could end up being neutral or even save the district some money. It was important that they said that we note that the SCG is not going to cover all the expenses. So in addition to talking about fiscal impacts, we also discussed, as you heard tonight, about turning Duranes into an early childhood center. So as far as La Luz, their FY24, their budget was 1.8 million. So the savings with that is going to be approximately 1.5 million. And that will continue, as I understood, it'll continue every year, that's what the savings will be. The lease revenue from the Albuquerque Sign Language Academy will be 103 to 122,000, and that would be based on enrollment. All the FTEs are transferred to other schools, and the grant and capital funding is redistributed to other schools, and the utilities were about 40,000. And when it comes to maintenance and landscaping that APS will do, that's going to be billed to the charter. As far as Corrales, about 30 Corrales, we are told kids left at mid-school, and we were told about 18 of those 30 went to Taylor. So then that means about 12 students left APS from 5th grade, and they went to other middle schools for 6th grade. As far as the Corrales K-8 in the 5th year of existence, they will be about $1 million in the red. And we've heard that there will be lower costs incurred at Corrales than at Janet Kahn because the 6th graders will continue operating in the elementary model. So there will only be electives for 7th and 8th graders. So that's where we'll have some savings. There will be increased cost incurred as they will be paying the principal at a middle school level. So in order to save the district money, we need to be able to, at Corrales, recruit or retain 210 students by FY30. So, but if we don't do anything, we won't realize a financial gain. So we're just hoping that with the retention and recruitment of more students, that there will be some financial gain by 2030. As far as Janet Kahn, very similar to Corrales, they have increased costs because they're going to operate middle school with 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. So they will have electives. They will also be paying at a middle school principal salary. And Janet Kahn will likely keep operating in the red, but to save district money, they would need to recruit or retain about 195 students by FY30. So that is the hope. When it came to a lot of people are obviously interested in the middle school redesign. So the middle school task force already is working on this. I'm trying to make middle schools more attractive and welcoming to students and families. So they're looking at transition time from elementary to mid, from mid to high. if it's flexible scheduling, project-based learning, more supports with counselors, nurses, community school coordinators, and more rigor. But as Member Peterson pointed out, you shouldn't just have rigor just for rigor's sake. It should be more engaging and enriching. And then one of the last things that we talked about is the Duranis Early Childhood Center, which you heard a lot about tonight. And the board did vote to approve the ESSER funds for, end up being about $900,000 just to get that design going. And then they'll be spending about $30 million to refurbish some of the schools that are going to be affected by the right sizing. And we also heard tonight that it'll probably be approximately $16 million if it does end up getting built, to build that Duranis Early Childhood Hub. I know some of the things that were pointed out is that, there are not that many students under the age of 5, in the entire North Valley, as we're continuing to lose population. We also, there was pointed out that the interim goal they were going to be concentrating on is more about kindergarten readiness, not pre-K readiness. And then pointed out that the Early Childhood Hub was a pilot, and that maybe have been the wrong word because there isn't a time frame and no, how are you measuring success, and what happens if it doesn't draw the children that we hope will be up to 300 kids. The pre-K fund grants were pointed out at fund at $10,000 per pre-K students, and APS only applied for this coming year for 4-year-olds. And that was for over 1,300 students. And the possibility was put out there that they may apply for 3-year-olds next year, which scared the heck out of me. And we were told that there's about 800 private and community providers. I personally think that there's more than that, but that's the number that we were given. There was a question as why expand when there are so many vacancies, and we're not even filling what we have. And if that funding that was requested was just in anticipation of expansion, and was pointed out that private provider numbers are down, and when they're down, they are not allowed to expand. And another question was if APS reverted any funds back to the state for the vacancies, which we were told that they didn't. And another question is why expand pre-K when you have vacancies? And if transportation won't be provided, we know that that's often such an impediment to attendance for many of our families. There was questions raised about whether this was the best use of our under-enrolled schools and whether there's really a need or demand for the early childhood hubs. And then we also heard about the early childhood design committee that consists of 13 members. We're hoping that's going to be more. 6 were from APS, 1 from the city, 1 from county, 1 from UNM, 1 from CNM, 1 from YDI, and only 2 private. So as was pointed out, the majority of the committee are government staff. So we asked that more community-based providers were included. And as far as future topics are still going to be dual language pathways, the possibility of Coronado becoming a K-8 school with older students attending at a repurposed Taft, with the understanding that we are going to most certainly, I hope, listen to the concerns from Washington Middle School staff and that community. We expect many more conversations about early childhood centers, about other boundary changes and CTE as we continue our work. The next right-sizing discussion group meeting has yet to be scheduled. So that's it.
Thank you, board member. Any questions for that? So thank you for that. Right, so our next item for discussion is just a report on the superintendent search. So just an update for the board on where we are. I began talking about the search for our successor for Superintendent Elder, whose contract ends at the end of June 30th, 2024. Met with the executive committee, so board members Jackson and board member Mueller-Aragon we had a conversation. We began to look at revising and reviewing and revising the scope of work for search and recruitment services. What we did is we just looked at a previous RFP and description that we have, and we're working on that. And the goal there is to have this done so that we can share what we have, give it on to the rest of the board, who will also be included in reviewing the recommended changes and recommendations. We'll bring that, and hopefully we can finalize that on July 19th at our meeting then. Then we can get it posted for we can have it posted for requests for proposals. We hope to have that request for proposals at least for a month and have someone identified by the end of August. So that's what we're moving on there. In addition to this, working with with our board administrator, Johanna King, on our budget and our timeline so that we can work on that. Started a draft timeline with the executive committee. And again, we'll have that we can bring together to the whole board so that we can finalize some of the dates on that. It was a good conversation. So we're trying to put all of our timelines together here so that we can, and what our goal is here essentially is just like working back, is that hopefully we could have a successor, because I know I'm watching the papers out there, is hoping that we could have a successor named. It doesn't necessarily, they won't be started or working, but hopefully working backwards from that by the spring. I'm not going to say when, what month, but by the spring. So that way there's plenty of time there for some transition with the current staff to the new superintendent as we move forward. In the meantime, the other thing that we have to do as a board, we have to work on revising the superintendent's job description. There is one so that we can ensure that it focuses on student outcomes and aligns with the district's goals and guardrails and the priorities around the strategic plan. So we do have an old description that we'll also share with the rest of the board. We're reaching out, plan to do some research and seek assistance from our partners at the Council of Great City Schools and other large urban school districts that have superintendent job descriptions that had been created under the SOFG pieces, and see how that could be aligned and maybe included as well as part of our description. So that's another piece that we can work on, and we will send that out to the board. What you'll also be receiving from me, I sent it off to Johanna, is there's the Council of Great City Schools has a pretty nice timeline and some of the key activities that we need to do, the key questions we need to ask ourselves. So I'll be sending that out to the board too, so that there'll be those key questions that you can ask. And then we'll all come together and we can work on making sure that we've addressed everyone's concerns as we're moving forward. And we've got the pieces that we need to have so that we can get this done. What's really exciting about this is that we have lots of time. We have some time to get our stuff together with a goal in the middle here of going out, once we have a search firm who can assist us, will assist us with key things like the community engagement piece on how we go out, listen to the community in terms of what are the key, what their expectations are and what they would like to see in this process, or giving us some input in terms of the qualities and the qualifications for a superintendent. We'll be synthesizing all that information, obviously. One of the things that I'd like to consider, and I think we just need to talk about that as a board too, and with our search firm when they come in, is like, do we have another broader committee that is also working with us on this? And it's not just the board, but that we also have some community members that maybe are working with us on this process. So I think once we have a search firm, we can talk to them about those processes and how, or whatever they propose to us in terms of their proposal to us in terms of how they'd like to work with us. We obviously have to get some interview questions all designed and all that. But again, once we have a search firm that helps us with that process. Also built into our timeline is taking into account that we're going to have some new board members as a result of the election, and trying to build in some time before the board is actually, the new board members are actually sworn in, but have an opportunity with them to bring them up to speed in terms of where we are in the process. So that way they can hit the ground running. Obviously, looking at the selection and the interviewing process with the superintendent occurring just immediately after the election, and the new board would take on that responsibility. So just making sure that there's time built in there for the new board members as they're getting oriented to the district, but they're also getting oriented to the process. So let's see, what else might I have on here? I just want to add that we're really committed to making this process as transparent as possible. There's more to come. We want to make sure that the community is engaged, and the great conversation now is like, what do we want to have moving forward? And it's a good opportunity for us, for the board to work with the community as we kind of step forward into this next step, so that we can make this transition as smooth as possible and as positive as possible. And so there's a lot of anticipation, I know, from especially from the media, in terms of what are we going to do and how are we going to do it. And so hopefully you will start to hear from each of our meetings that this will be a regular conversation as well, a topic, so that we can make sure that we're just being as transparent as possible with the community in terms of where we are in the process and the steps that we're taking. Oh, I do want to add that on that RFP, and this is for the board, the RFP process did have a chance to talk with Ms. Apodaca. What we'll do on that is I'm going to have the executive committee be on the RFP committee on that. So the executive committee will review the proposals that we have, and then there will be a presentation made to the board, very similar to what the staff does in terms of here's who applied, here's the scores, and we'll present those to the board about what the selection is on there. Hopefully we get, several proposals so that we have a way to sort of look through that and wade through a search firm that can help us in the best way possible. So I will stop there and ask for any comments, questions, additional thoughts, things we need to think about.
Lots of work.
Lots of work. Yeah, and we're just beginning. So, I think it's for the community, it's just, we're just beginning the process, and just lots of work ahead. But I'm hopeful that once we can get a search firm, helping with us on this process, they'll really sort of guide us more through the process and take us through that. So that's the hardest part, is just getting to that point. So, all right.
I have one question it's related, but so during this next year, I would assume Superintendent Elder is probably going to be using some time and, exhausting some of that what he has left. So has it been decided who is going to fill that in the meantime?
Not yet. I did talk to Superintendent Elder about that just right after, and he's you all did see today there was an announcement of some reorganization. So that's going to be coming next, and having some conversation in terms of when that's going to occur and how that transition, that timeline will occur in terms of when he'll be backing off, I guess you could say, or taking some time off. But right now at this point, he's on. And so we haven't had that finalized just yet.
Has he started using any of his leave yet?
He's just using time here and there. He's taken like a couple of days of vacation, but he doesn't have anything announced in terms of like a length of time that he's going to be taking off.
Okay.
But I'm sure once we get to that point, we'll announce that and let you all know. Any other
I just
questions?
didn't know, because with his absence tonight, and I just didn't know if we were already.
No, he is still on. I think he's at a conference. Yeah. So
I didn't know.
no. He's still working. Any other comments, questions? All right. Okay, the next Board of Education meeting will be held on Wednesday, July 19th, 2023 at 5 p.m. And the next special Board of Education meeting will be held on Wednesday, June 28th, 2023 at 5:15 p.m. or immediately following the Finance Committee meeting. Both will be held in the John Milne Community Boardroom of the Allison Bruce King Educational Complex and live stream on aps.edu. So our next item is consideration for the Board of Education to convene an executive session as authorized by the Public Meetings Act, Section 10-15-1H5 to discuss collective bargaining. Do I have a motion?
Okay, I move to convene to executive session as authorized by the Public Meetings Act, Section 1015-1H5 to discuss collective bargaining.
I second. This is Josefina.
Have a roll call, please.
Peggy Mueller Aragon,
Yes.
Danielle Gonzalez,
Yes.
Barbara Peterson,
Yes.
Crystal Tapia Romero,
Yes.
Josefina Dominguez,
Yes.
Courtney Jackson,
Yes.
Yolanda Montoya Cordova.
Yes. All right. So now we'll just ask for all the folks that are not part of this